Hi there, and welcome to this webcast. My name is Jonathan Foust, and I'm delighted you are here. Um, I'm going to be sharing a talk after our meditation, exploring this whole realm of awakening and the use of psychedelics. So stay tuned if you're interested in that. In the meantime, some announcements and thank yous, and then a short meditation before we launch. First of all, big thank you to the Insight Meditation Community of Washington for hosting this event and to our producer, Glenn Harrison. Also, a big thank you to our mindful movement leader, to Rita Moran. If you'd like to join her, you can join up at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time, and that will take you right up to 7:30 Eastern Standard Time when the webcast starts. You can find the link for her Zoom class on my webpage and on my Facebook page. Um, let's see, what else? Um, these are all offered freely. So much of what I've received in my own practice has been the result of generosity from others. And in that same way, I'm inspired to do the same. So there are no ads, there's no gateway to this stuff. It's all offered so that anyone who's interested won't be denied access. If you feel at all inspired to help me in doing this, um, I would gratefully receive your support, and you can do that through my website. I've got a newsletter that I send out from time to time. I share my best photography, kind of a summary of talks that I've done, and so forth. And the next big thing I'd like to share with you is that I am offering the 11th Year of Living Mindfully program this fall. This is primarily for those who can attend retreats in the DC area. There are a number of day-long retreats and a residential week-long retreat. In addition to that, there's so much in this program. It's a lot. It's a commitment to survive this program, but it's very transformational. You can find more on my website there. A year of mindful living, and the applications are due June 1st. So it's a limited, it's a small program. If you're interested, do check it out. So, with that being said, let us move to a short meditation. You might close your eyes for a moment and just check in with this body you tend to be inhabiting these days and sense if it might like to move in some way. Would you like to stretch, adjust your posture, anything that's going to help you kind of get the wiggles out and help you to settle in? And as you're ready, take some time to begin to slow down your breath and notice where you feel the breath on the inside. And notice how by directing your attention to the experience of the breath, you're shifting from the realm of thinking to this whole realm of experiencing the moment. Where do you feel the breath? Notice as well the sounds around you. If you open your awareness 360 degrees, what are the sound vibrations right now? And if you turn your attention to the experience of the air touching your skin, what is the temperature and the texture of the air? If your eyes are closed and you turn your attention to the visual experience, can you perceive the light beyond your closed eyes? Is there anything in the realm of smell that you can detect? Is there any lingering taste that's present? When you turn your attention to the senses, to feeling, to hearing, visuals, smell, taste, you shift your attention to the direct experience of the moment. You might like to select one of these touch points. For many, it's the breath. At the belly, the nostrils, the general sense of the body breathing. For others, sound is very compelling. And yet others really like the sense of the hands, the feeling in the hands. Whatever you elect to focus on for these next minutes, turn your attention now to the direct experience right at the point of contact. And as you notice the experience, can you also sense who you are as the one who's aware, the observer, or the witness? Now, one way to dramatically enhance a sense of present moment awareness or concentration is by deepening your sense of relaxation. A few particular areas you might focus on. First is the muscles of the face. For the next few out breaths, is it possible to feel your face expressionless, letting all the micro muscles of your face relax? Could you relax your tongue and let your tongue fill your lower jaw? Could you relax the root of your tongue down into your throat while simultaneously softening and relaxing the jaw? And now bring your attention fully to the experience of breath or sound or feeling tone in the hands. And for these next few minutes, when the mind naturally wanders, notice how gently you can bring it back. Can you sense this quality of non judging awareness? The mind naturally comes in with commentary, pushes away, grasps. And can you sense who you are as the observer, the one who is aware? And you might now just explore what it's like to soften any sense of doing and explore a sense of what we might call simply being. Let your focus on the anchor of breath or sound fall away. If you like, let your awareness widen and broaden, opening 360 degrees. And for the next minute, in the absence of any effort, what do you feel inside? What do you notice? Exploring these questions. What are you aware of right now? And can you let it be? You might very gently deepen your breath. Let your body sway a little bit from side to side or stretch in any way that feels good for you. And very gently now begin your transition. No hurry, no rush. And welcome back. I grew up on a farm on a dirt road in the Pennsylvania Dutch country. And when I was about 7 years old, 6, 7, 8, I think around 7, I experienced something that I can only describe as a moment of grace or a moment of awakening. I was leaning up against a big pine tree behind the farmhouse, and I just felt myself merging with the tree and just opening into this very, very deep sense of presence, a sense of profound expansion. In my 7-year-old brain, the only way I could describe it was like the stars in the sky were like cells in my body. It's incredible, a searing experience. And I remember very clearly running into the farmhouse and telling my mother, who looked at me and said, "Wash your hands, it's time for lunch." 8 years later, age 15, and a Quaker boarding school, a roommate of mine told me about something he got called orange barrel. If you're not familiar with orange barrel, it is a one of the variations of LSD. So he and I had that experience. And my big takeaway from that experience at age 15 was everything the adults have been telling me is way, way off. Something dramatically changed for me. And 2 weeks later, I had two profound experiences on top of that. One of them was a yoga class I went to. During the yoga nidra, or the deep relaxation, I felt this incredible sense of expansion. And I also got initiated into transcendental meditation. And in that experience, my experience of meditation for the first time, in this case, mantra meditation, I had this cellular sense that I'll be doing this or some variation of this for the rest of my life. And so far, I have. That experience through psychoactive substances changes the directions of my life. And I don't share that story because I think I'm unique. As Werner Erhard said, 5 billion people thinking they are unique is not unique. But I do believe we have some memory, some deep interest in who and what we truly are. We have some experience with the mystery, and we all have some interest in what this life is all about, who and what we truly and deeply are. So for me, as this 15-year-old kid, trying this thing called Orange Barrel, had this profound mystical experience. No one can really explain it, but with deep, deep good fortune, I stumbled into these ancient practices that have transformed lives over millennia and certainly have transformed mine. Now, my experience at age 15 was way, way under the radar. But imagine a 15-year-old boy, let's say 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago. In fact, there are indications that Native Americans were likely to have used peyote since at least 5,500 years ago. Let's say a 15-year-old took part in a peyote ceremony, but done as part of a ritual, done under the supervision of a skilled leader, done in the context of community, done in the context of a culture that embraced the mystical, that had a relationship with the mystical through not just psychoactive substances, but through their own rituals, their own ethics, their own practices. Why am I sharing all this? Well, there is an incredible wave moving through our culture. Some might call it a tipping point that's helping people heal and transform and maybe changing the consciousness of the planet. What I like to talk about here, there are 4 questions I'd like to explore. The first is in regard to something Dr. Jean Houston said a long time ago, predicting the discovery of what she called ancient future technologies. And the question is, how do these ancient practices relate to now? The second thing I'd like to explore is what happens when you shift out of the linear rational mind into these altered states with awareness. What is this? What is the subjective experience, and how is science shifting our understanding of what's happening? Third, what are the potential possibilities in psychedelic therapy, and what are the dangers? And fourth, I'd like to talk a little bit about the general call to wake up to a greater reality. We all have this call to be awake. How have we done it? And are there alternatives to psychedelics as a tool for transformation? Okay. So, about 3 decades ago, maybe more, I heard this line attributed to Jean Houston. And Jean Houston was associated with the human potential movement, where she said, we are heading into an age of the discovery of ancient future technologies. I was kind of thrilled by that. I didn't have any idea what it meant, but it sounded really, really good. And I think I have a better idea now. When we discover a technology for consciousness, it gets passed around. Just very, very briefly, because I've talked about this before, as meditation made its way as a discovery into human consciousness, and let's just say 2,500 years ago, with the experience and the teachings of the Buddha, the news followed the trade routes, went into Southeast Asia, Tibet, China, Korea, Japan, and it fused and took on the qualities of those cultures. In Southeast Asia, it kept the very orthodox qualities because everyone practiced in isolation in the woods, in the forests. In Tibet, it fused with the animistic culture. In China, it fused with Confucianism. In Korea, it took on kind of this fierce form of inquiry practice. Japan, it took on the flavor of Zen. And when it moved to the West, we did functional MRIs when people meditated. We observed what parts of the brain lit up under different techniques. We mapped out brainwave activity. We did double-blind studies. And because we scienced it, I like to say that if meditation was a drug, it would be considered the miracle drug of this era. And because of the science, there is this new level of acceptance by many. The Marines now practice meditation. Insurance companies underwrite meditation. Schools explore how to bring mindfulness into curriculum to help kids work and study better. Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio, with whom I've had the honor to share the podium, he wrote a book called A Mindful Nation. And he said, I have proposed legislation based on science a lot less solid than the research on mindfulness that's out there right now. The same process could be said for consciousness altering substances. Substances have been used in indigenous cultures for a very, very long time. There's a study in the National Institute of Health, psychoactive substances of natural origin, toxicological aspects, therapeutic properties, and analysis in biological samples. It's an amazing list. Here's a quick list. Betel nut, or betel quid. This is a nut from Asia, Sri Lanka, Malaysia. It induces a quality of euphoria and yet alertness. It has antidepressive qualities. Adugoda, or elephant creeper, or morning glory, native to Mexico and Central America. Similar effects to LSD. Ayahuasca is a vine from Ecuador, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil. Very, very powerful hallucinogenic qualities. Khat is a flowering evergreen shrub from West Africa, and Yemen and Ethiopia. It has a quality of well-being, euphoria, increased energy, alertness. Jimson weed in the United States. Well-being, euphoria, hallucinations. Mandrake is from the Eastern Mediterranean. It's the root of the plant that increases pain, has a hallucinogenic quality. Peyote from Mexico and US is like a small button-shaped spineless cactus. Again, consciousness shifter, hallucinogenic, shifts your relationship to pain. Kratom is a topical evergreen that's used for pain relief, anxiety, depression. Kava from the Pacific region, the ground roots of a plant, kind of a mood elevator, well-being, contentment. Psilocybin from South America, United States, Western Europe, mushroom, an antidepressant, anti-anxiety, again, hallucinogenic qualities. Salvia from Mexico, an herb from the mint family, has a quickening of the senses, again, powerful implications. Iboga is a root bark brewed in the palm wine from Central and West Africa. Again, psychoactive effects stimulant. So why do I mention these? Well, two things. One, these are examples of how humans are naturally drawn to investigate and experiment and alter their states through a millennia. Second is I've started a company offering sample packs for you. You can dial the 800 number on your screen right now. That's not true. So we're doing the same thing we did with mindfulness, with these naturally occurring substances that have been around for thousands of years. Double-blind studies, the use of functional MRIs to study what parts of the brain are affected, exploring doses and different effects. This has been happening for a long time. Albert Hofmann, who was a Swiss chemist known to be the first to synthesize, ingest, and learn the effects of LSD, he also isolated, named, and synthesized the principal psychedelic mushroom compounds of psilocybin. And he went on to synthesize other compounds, and his rigorous work brought a legitimacy that sparked a revolution in Western culture. And in the US, a lot of that action was at Harvard. And at Harvard, two of the better known professors, or rather ex professors, were Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary. They ran experiments exploring the use of LSD and psilocybin. At first, they they used a lot of scientific rigor, and then things got a little bit looser. Rather than doing experiments in the labs, they joined the participants informally. And as you can imagine, it was quite popular with students, but not so popular with the administration. You may know Richard Alpert, who took the name Ram Dass from his teacher, and he went on to explore Eastern teachings and became quite the influence in the West. Multiple books, Be Here Now, How Can I Help, Grist for the Mill. I know many, many people like myself who read those books and determined their life was going to be different. Timothy Leary became a proponent of these liberating chemicals. Um, he wanted them to be available to everyone. He saw this as a revolution of consciousness and a reshaping of our culture. The phrase turn on, tune in, drop out was attributed to him. And he became a focus of the Nixon administration and went through a lot of legal trouble. So the result of the 60s and the Cultural Revolution resulted in a lot of unskillful use of these psychoactive substances and then a huge backlash. Turn on, tune in, drop out gave way to just say no. And then the drugs were locked up for a long time. So, how does the brain evolve? How does consciousness evolve? There's some really interesting theories on consciousness expansion. And I just thought I would share with you because, if nothing else, I find them pretty entertaining. A few wild theories about how natural substances actually kicked off human evolution. One is the stoned ape theory, formed by Terence McKenna. It's not his title. He complained about the title of the stoned ape because he said this dumbs things down. The whole idea here is 40,000 years ago, there was this creative explosion in Homo sapiens. There was a leap in cognitive ability for early humans. And what was this leap in language and self-consciousness? Well, it's argued that it's possible that some plants had something to do with this. Augmented empathy, sensory perception, visual acuity. Back then, we were hunter-gatherers. We were eating and sampling. We were noting what was nutritious and what would kill us. And these plant medicines, if you will, had some therapeutic effects. And a big one was consciousness, becoming more aware of self, aware of others, a sense of interconnectedness, a heightened awareness of sensation. Synesthesia is the stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway that leads to an involuntary experience in a secondary pathway. So imagine as we are hunter-gathering and sampling different things, these naturally occurring substances sort of exploded our brain and our consciousness and made us more interconnected and more aware. So another theory is the drunken monkey theory. Again, kind of a dumb title, but if one assumes we evolved from monkeys, initially we lived in trees and we ate fruit. Well, the best, most ripe fruit will fall from the trees to the ground. And this initiated two things: moving from the trees to the ground and getting high on fermented fruit. But if you look back, it seems that throughout the ages, there have been these amazing visionaries. There have been shamans and rishis and seers and yogis. No doubt they opened the doors of perception through meditation, through purification, through communion with the divine. And there's more and more evidence that points toward that this investigation into consciousness also included plant medicines. So, what happens when you shift out of the linear, rational mind? About 10 years ago, I met Dr. Roland Griffiths. Roland was a highly respected research scientist at Johns Hopkins. His initial research was on caffeine, and he published a number of groundbreaking papers. And somehow he made the move to researching psilocybin, or magic mushrooms. And at this time, there was an interest and funding due to his integrity and his fastidiousness. And because of his integrity, his research took off. And there were certain questions that he had. What would be the effect of high-dose psilocybin be on those with cancer and terminal illness? What would the effect of high-dose psilocybin be with addiction? What if we did control groups with placebos, did blood work, did functional MRIs before and after, along with extensive interviews? He was looking for recommendations for that first group, and I had the perfect person in mind. I recommended someone I knew who had advanced prostate cancer. And I love this guy. He's the kind of guy you would automatically think was an Eagle Scout in high school, upstanding citizen. He was in his 70s. He grew up on a dairy farm. He got involved in service work. He ran an NGO doing service work overseas. And he signed up for the program, and I saw him months later. And I said, "Oh my gosh, how was it?" And he said, "It was the deepest, most religious experience of my life. I am more than fine." I have goosebumps just thinking about that. So, what happens when you expand awareness? What shifted for him? How did that happen? In the face of a terminal illness, how did he get to a place where he could say, "I am more than fine"? There was a third project, and it was this question: what is the effect of high-dose psilocybin on long-term meditators? And I was invited to not only come up with some recommendations, but to explore with Roland and others a protocol that we might use. We looked for the right kinds of people and actually ran into a little bit of a challenge because a lot of long-term meditators really kind of live within the precepts, the Buddhist precepts. And the fifth precept: adhere to the guideline of abstaining from substances that might clear or cloud the mind. And so there's a lot of conversation whether this was against the precepts or not. But in exploring the protocol, I was also the first to go through the process. And I have to say here that this was not my first rodeo. I had done some chemical research in the past, not a huge amount, but I had some experience. Now, when you do a journey, one of the most important elements is called set and setting. Beforehand, because again, this was a fastidious study, there were countless hours of intake, interviews, of physical essays. And the setting was a beautiful space they had created, lying down on this really comfortable sofa. I had two facilitators, wonderful, wonderful guides, headphone with a soundtrack and eye shades. And we had a fight about the headphones because they had a soundtrack that everyone used. And I was basically saying meditators don't meditate with music. But because they had used the soundtrack in all the sessions, they needed consistency. So we compromised, sometimes with it, sometimes without. So as I lay down and settled in with my two guides there, these incredibly loving people, after a little while, I thought, oh, nuts. They slipped me the placebo. There's a New Yorker cartoon. It's six people. Three of them are holding hands in ecstatic dance. Three of them are sitting on the couch looking bored. And the caption says, well, I guess we're in the placebo group. Then suddenly, this huge realization. Now, we process information four ways: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and through just direct cognition. You just know. And this was through direct cognition. I just got the whole thing. I sat up, I took off my headphones, I took off my eye shades, and I said, my older brother wanted to kill me, and I understand why. I put on the headphones, put on my eye shades, and lay back down again. And I had this tangible memory of being this cute, innocent, charming little baby. And my brother, about 4 years older than me, hating me, wanting me dead. Obviously, competition for attention, affection, and love. And I was taking that away from him. And that imprint, I suddenly got this insight into the imprint and how that had such a massive effect on our relationship, on my personality, and on my character. And I completely understood, of course, he wanted me dead. But how did that insight happen? How was I able to recognize such a deep, deep imprint in my psyche? A dear friend who's in his early 80s with a number of health issues did a journey with a guide, set and setting. We went for a walk afterward. And my friend has published many, many times. He's lived in ashrams. He's followed gurus. He's done so much meditation. He's done all kinds of self-discovery work. And he told me this. He said, of all the personal development work I've done in my life, I never realized that I never forgave my mother for dying when I was 13. I could feel it, this hole. It kept pushing and breathing, and finally it opened. And now that it feels healed, I've never felt so alive. How do insights arise? Well, some of it is shifting our physiology. Now, I have to read this because I don't understand what I'm reading. Binding to serotonergic 5-HT2A receptors. Agonist activity as these receptors lead to neuromodulatory changes in synaptic efficacy, have a profound effect on hierarchical message passing in the brain. I'm not going to read that again. Aldous Huxley put it this way. He talked about accessing the mind at large. The human mind filters reality under normal circumstances, and some psychoactive drugs remove the filter, exposing the user to the mind at large. So they're talking about nirvikalpa samadhi, savakalpa samadhi, kensho, satori. We use terms like these, terms like Maya, because we don't have the technical terms for these states. So these experiences of mystical states are full of paradoxes. Now, who knows where the research is going to go, but we have been in a golden era of research right now. Studies of psilocybin, studies of LSD, studies of ketamine, a dissociative drug used as an anesthetic that can cause the user to feel detached from reality but cultivate insights. Ayahuasca, 5-MeO-DMT, MDMA, salvia, kratom, mescaline, and it's having an effect. The science is changing things. Because of this scrupulous research, ketamine is now an FDA-approved substance. A while back, I spoke with someone I've known for many, many years who struggled his whole life with depression. An incredibly sweet person. He's a scientist, deeply respected, many publications. And as we were talking, he told me he started working with psychotropics. And I asked, which ones? And he turned to me and he said, ketamine has saved my life. The way he said it spontaneously brought tears to my eyes. There's so much potential with these substances. But I'd be remiss in not naming some of the concerns. You have a knife. A scalpel in the hands of a surgeon can save lives. But a knife in the hands of someone disturbed can do great damage. So I'd like to share a little bit about the upside and a little bit about the downside. There are so many stories of healing and new possibilities. With many of these substances, of extremely low chance of lethal overdose. They are non-addictive. I don't think there's anyone who has done a psilocybin experience and thought the next day, I need to do this again. Usually it's like, let's talk in a year or two. There's research that's fully corroborating what works, how it best works, and who it works best with. One story I ran across was of a 3-star general, and after retirement, he had a number of people working for him. And one was a vet with severe PTSD. In desperation, this vet left the country to get some psychedelic-assisted therapy, and when he returned, the retired general was so amazed by his transformation that he has now become active in exploring how to bring these substances for others who are suffering. PTSD, depression, anxiety, addiction, they're all showing tremendous possibilities. As someone active in moving this forward said, even if this wasn't for everyone, if there was a cost-effective way to help those, just say 10% of those suffering, why wouldn't we do it? So the upside is huge. But of course, there's a downside. And maybe you've seen this if you've looked at all into the world of this. First is commercialism. You know, where there's attention, there's money to be made. There's psychedelic tourism. There's a gray market and a black market in substances that is not necessarily safe. One of the things that concerns me the most as someone who is sort of taken this role of teacher in my life is what I call the rise of the neo-shamans. And these are people who are not necessarily trained, who have taken up the mantle of being guides, of mixing substances, of doing weekend retreats with people using multiple substances. There are a lot of broken people who are rushing into this. And it's very similar to my experience in meditation, because back in the earlier days in the meditation world, people who were interested in doing intensive practice kind of self-selected. But of course, with science and more recommendations, more and more people are rushing in assuming it will help, when in fact, for some, a practice of meditation is actually contraindicated. People are desperate. And just like unregulated cancer treatments, people will try anything. And there are, in my opinion, and I may be wrong, some dubious people who are offering their services. William Picard, who was a prominent LSD researcher and a producer of LSD, and he was one of the producers of the most amount of LSD, said, "This is for healthy people. There are different medical models, and we don't give medicine to people who aren't prepared for it. So, just as there can be untrained and unskillful guides, there are challenges around what unsupervised use can result in and what can happen. For some people, they can have a very powerful experience, but then what do you do 3 days later when a profound insight arises and there's no one there to support you? So, there are a lot of different systems that can help wake us up: yoga, intensive meditation, so many therapeutic modalities. Again, Gene Houston, we're entering into an age of ancient future technologies. One of the most influential researchers in LSD was Stanislav Grof, who was a researcher at Harvard. And after the debacle with Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, they took his LSD away. And he wanted to explore, is there some other modality that can help me to find out ways that people can reliably shift their consciousness and track its effect? And he developed a form of breath work called holotropic breathing, which you may have heard of. There are different forms of transformational breathing that induce non-ordinary states of consciousness. Holotropic breathwork is one, and many, many others. And I got trained and certified in another school of breathwork and have led intensives in this for many, many decades. It's quite profound. Now, what's really interesting is this whole concept of psychedelic therapy. It's not that it's coming, it's already here. There is so much research that has been done. And Michael Pollan's book, Change Your Mind, has had huge influence. A very good friend of mine, Dr. Manish Agrawal, is an oncology doctor, and he got turned onto the possibilities, and here in DC has built a facility and is conducting trials and has plans to expand, working with people end of life on how they can cultivate insights and healing. It's extraordinary because what he has created is this set and setting where people can feel safe, people are well trained, they're led by someone deeply, deeply skilled. So, as fraught as this movement is, there are tremendous, tremendous reasons for hope. My friend Roland died about a year ago. Though he knew he was dying, he put all of his attention into two things. First was funding a chair at Johns Hopkins to explore psychedelics and consciousness, and his last research project. And this project was taking religious leaders from all different traditions and taking them through this experience of high dose psilocybin. What did they experience? A couple things. They all found that it offered one of the most meaningful experiences of their lives. It enhanced their religious practice and functioning as a spiritual leader. And it directly reflected what we could call perennial philosophy. That is to say, what was true thousands of years ago and true now and true in the future, the underlying truth that unifies all religions. And it increased, again, this was through interviews and so forth, among all these religious leaders, an increased tolerance for diversity and a deep appreciation or a deepening appreciation of other religious traditions, and a sense of the possibility that we can feel our interconnectedness and embrace our interconnectedness despite all the differences. When I was in college, I read a book that was quite transformational for me. It was called Mysticism by Evelyn Underhill. And it was a study of mystics through all the ages. And the bottom line is they had all the same experience, the same transcendent experience, like me as a 7-year old, feeling the stars and the sky as cells in my body. And they took that experience and they translated it back into their culture according to their religious upbringing, up to their sexual orientation, up to the language of their era. And for me, my experience took me to a deepening understanding of my experience through practicing through the lens of Buddhist psychology. Number one, that nothing whatsoever is to be clung to as I or mine. When my sense of I and mine fell away, a deep, deep possibility of healing arose. Every one of us has moments when that tightly held sense of self gets a little bit looser. And that sense of presence, the sense of the mystery arises. And with that can be gratitude, appreciation, and joy. So Andrew Carnegie once said that everyone is listening to the same radio station, WIFM. What's in it for me? And you might be wondering if there might be something here for you. You might be wondering if it might be of help to someone that you know of. I am very cautious in recommending psychedelic therapy. I have had profound experiences in meditation and intensive meditation itself. And I have had some profound life-changing insights in the use of substances. Again, my experience is not vast. I think we would all love a world without suffering. And these technologies, as ancient as they are, whether it be the use of psychoactive substances for thousands of years, or the practice of meditation, yoga, and all the other therapeutic techniques that open us up to greater possibilities, they're all there. I think the most important thing is to reflect on what's most important in your life and what would most support you in your transformation. Before the use of psychoactive substances, I truly feel there is so much to be gained through the organic practice of meditation and through the organic practice of connecting with like-minded people. And if you are called to ensure, number one, that you feel safe, that the set and setting is right for you, that you have a sense of connection, a sense of the possibility of integration with whatever your experience may be. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I know that for some it is a controversial topic, and yet at the same time, it's very much alive in our culture right now. The most important thing, I feel, is to be awake, to be alive, fully alive to what is true. There are lots of paths, and it's so helpful to take your time and discern what path most calls you and to explore what you might need to open fully to what's possible in your life. Thank you for your time and for your attention. And so many blessings in your practice and wherever you feel called.